My name is Jordan Rout. I am the owner of DPR Landscapes, and I'm a hardscaper.
All right, Jordan, let's get started to get to know a little bit more about yourself, how you came into the industry, and how you got to where you are now. Can you give our audience a little bit of context about that?
I first got into hardscaping working for another company, obviously, like most of us do. I was in grade 12, and my current partner was actually working at this company called Red Rose. They were fairly well known in our local area. He got me a job there. I loved it. I mean, it was a way to make more than minimum wage, B, get a tan, and C, work out. So I saw it all as a good, benefit. And then, talking about the company a little bit itself, it's kind of funny because they were very old school. I mean, when I started landscaping, everything was hand dug, wheelbarrowed out, no machines. Rocks were transported to the backyard on pump carts. Natural stone steps were either rock barred in or they were, strapped in with straps. They kind of had a rule on the site that the machine that was used to load the trucks and unload the trucks would never leave the road. So we never used the machine to dig, never used the machine to move any brick. The brick basically was just transported off the truck, and then we would bring everything to where we're working with wheelbarrows. So it was very old school, like I said. My first day, basically, I still remember it. I went to go grab a shovel and started digging. And the foreman, because they were so particular about the way they did things, was like, nope, you don't know how to dig yet. Grab a barrel, run barrel runs. So that was basically how I started landscaping. I was fortunate enough to have a foreman that, really kind of took me under his wing, showed me how to hand grade. They never used any bars, so everything was just done with levels. Showed me how to do cuts, showed me how to do rock cuts, curve cuts, all that good stuff. And then basically I worked there just for 2 summers while I was in school. 1 year I was in university while I was studying criminology, actually. And then started to work as a child and youth worker after that. That's kind of how I got started in landscaping itself. As far as starting my business, in 2015, in order to kind of pay off school debt, I graduated with a criminology degree, and I had way too much school debt. So I thought, why don't I start a little bit of a side business? So I had a partner at the time. Me and him kind of started the business. I was working at a family group home as a child and youth worker at the time. I worked shift work. So essentially in the summertime, I would work, all winter doing that job. But then in the summer times, I would, use all my vacation, use all my sick days so that I could have weeks off so that I could, work on site. I also, had night shifts. So I would have my whole day free. So I'd basically, do my night shift and go in and work for the business, and kind of started our business. When the business started picking up, I, quit that job. So I quit the day job, shift job as a child and youth worker. And I actually went back to my university job as a bartender at nights. So that way I could actually work the landscaping during the day, but then I would, go in and work bartending during the nights, because we were kind of just testing the water and seeing how things were going, right? And then, fortunate enough, my old boss at Red Rose actually sat me down at his home and kind of taught me how to price things. All of the pricing kind of being based on square footages per rock, per slab, per yard, stuff like that. It's all kind of old school pricing. So again, fortunate enough that he kind of sat me down and kind of showed me the ropes. And then, just starting the business itself, we got all of our leads. Basically, we started doing door by door flyers. So we would just kind of drop flyers at doors. Then we kind of started realizing, we're probably not getting as good of a return on our time. So we actually started ringing doorbells and going door by door, talking to people and advertising all of our services. First, when we started the business, honestly, we we basically just wanted to do anything. I had a labor background, so we would, cut grass, weeded gardens, we mulched, we lay sod, we cleaned windows, we cleaned eaves troughs, we repaired interlock, basically did anything and everything under the sun just to kind of make some money. So at that point, like I said, we were just kind of testing the waters. So we ran everything kind of cash. It wasn't really a legitimized business, but then we started actually picking up some traction going into our second year. So we decided to register our business. And, at that point, we were a little bit more committed. I was still working my bartending job, but we basically started our business running out of, our parents' vehicles. We would, do landscaping out of a Mazda hatchback and a Toyota minivan, using all of our parents' tools. That's kind of how we, got started. And then finally we, got a real job. And we kind of used that money to buy an old 1500 Dodge with an 8-foot box. And I still remember, we thought we were big time at that point. We had made it. We finally got a pickup truck and, not knowing what really was to come in the future. But yeah, I mean, with that pickup truck, we'd do everything again, still really old school. We ran, wheelbarrows into the back of a truck, up a ramp, and then we unloaded them by hand at the dump. And then, the middle of 2016, our second year or so, finally got enough leads and stuff that I quit the bartending job and fully commit to the business, which was, really nerve-wracking. At that point, we would just hire some of our friends to help us out on bigger jobs that we got here and there. And then we would do all majority of the work ourselves. And then, 2017, which would have been our second year of legitimate business, but our first year of legitimate business, after we had, registered and got everything going. We got busy enough that we started getting full-time employees. And then my partner and I kind of sat down and we kind of realized that we're letting things slide as far as the office stuff goes. So my partner started running the office full-time and I ran the field full-time. So that's when we started actually really generating profit. Was kind of that first year of being legitimized. We started really generating profit and kind of felt like it was a real business. We were both fully committed to it, no part-time jobs or anything. And then actually at the end of 2018, going into 2019, my old business partner decided that it wasn't really his passion, this line of work. So he left the business. So I was kind of at a crossroads because I had always run the field and he had always run the office as far as the quotes, consultations, design, so on and so forth. So basically we had the guy that I mentioned, Derek, who got me my original job at Red Rose. We had him working with us. And I knew that the system worked with one partner being in the office and one partner being on the site, because you really want to make sure that, your quality doesn't suffer. And we didn't really have anyone else I didn't have anyone else that I thought, I could run the business myself and have someone on site that I could trust. So I actually offered Derek a partnership. So Derek is now my new partner. We incorporated the business, and that's kind of our background story and how I got into it.
Really interesting story and lots to go off of here that I want to get into you on. And it's starting with that partnership aspect of your business, getting into a partnership from the very beginning, ending up losing that initial partner, and then seeking out somebody who's already on your team to partner with. Talk to me about why the partnership aspect, any pros and cons that you've noticed between both partnerships, or even that first one, and why didn't that one work out? Can you kind of speak about this?
Yeah, of course. So, when we first kind of I got started in the business, it was me and, one of my good friends. We lived on the same street, went to school together. We both, basically just wanted to make money. We were ambitious. We wanted to make more money. So we started the business. it was great, like starting out, being friends and all that kind of stuff, and working with your buddy every single day, and that was fun. And then, like I said, we got to a crossroads where I was always more site driven and knew more about construction, whereas he always knew a little bit more about marketing and business strategies and so on and so forth. So we basically split and utilized our strengths. One day, we got in a bit of a fight, and I kind of said, you know what, hey, why don't you just run the office full time? I'll run the site full time, and then we'll do it this way. So I think that actually, like personally, I do think that is a good split and a good way to do a business. Obviously, you have to have people that fit those roles. So you have to have a person that, can lead a site, and you also have to have a person that knows, marketing and has organizational skills and admin skills and so on and so forth. So that really fit me and my original business partner's strengths and weaknesses. So I think it came down to, really utilizing what are your strengths, what are my strengths, what is my weakness, what's your weakness, right? So that's how that went. The way it kind of fell apart, there was no falling apart between him and I. Like the business was doing well. We were doing well. My old business partner basically just said, I don't feel like this is a lifelong thing for me. And he knew that I was very passionate about the business and about the career, and I was basically going to do it forever. So he kind of took it upon himself to say, hey, you know what? I feel like I'm losing passion in this. And I feel like I'm letting you down lately. So he decided to leave the business. We're still very good friends. So luckily enough, it didn't end sourly. So, Derek also, my current business partner now, him and I have been friends for years. We played competitive hockey together. So I knew Derek very well. So Derek and I are both very like-minded. So we do kind of have the same views on things, the same type of work ethic, and again, are both more hands-on people than office people. So for me, at the end of 2019 or 2018, beginning of 2019, it was a real learning curve for me because I stepped into the office and got off the tools, and Derek ran all the site because, Derek could do that. And then also I had not known some of the business practices and some of the quoting processes and design processes and consultation processes and marketing processes. So it was just natural that I took over that role of the business and he took over the on-site role. Derek and I mean, I think it ultimately ended up being a better partnership. Our last 2 years have been our best year of business. So I personally, I think all of it kind of aligned, the stars all kind of aligned and everything's kind of working out. Again, my passion still is on site. I like to keep my hands busy, and, sometimes sitting at a desk by yourself all day long is not the most ideal thing, but that's not kind of our goal, long-term goal for the business, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Gotcha. So going back to that, the time when you're trying to get this business off its feet and trying to get it going, you mentioned that you guys were working jobs still and doing this kind of in your time off, and then you slowly started transitioning more and more towards it. Is this, if there's somebody out there listening to this podcast episode right now and they're thinking about getting into this industry and they're wondering where that dive off point is when they take that leap and they start their own business, would you recommend them to go ahead, take that leap, or to do something similar to what you did, where you were working other jobs and kind of testing the waters and seeing how the market was before taking that leap?
I would suggest kind of dipping your toes in slowly. It depends on where you're at, I think. So again, I think it really depends on where you are in your life. So for me, I was a 21-year-old just coming out of university, still living at my parents' house, and had a ton of school debt. We never took out a business loan, and we haven't to this day. We have never taken out any loans, lines of credit, or anything to purchase things or buy equipment. So I think it might be different if you were a little bit older, and let's say you have a little bit of equity and maybe your homes or investments and stuff like that you can pull from and lean on in times that you're not busy. But as a young person starting out, I think it is important to still have that backup, because when things aren't going well, at least you have something to lean on and you're not going to get discouraged in the process. Because by no means does any entrepreneur or business owner start a business and take off and succeed in their absolute first year and they're like, extremely profitable. Don't get me wrong, if you're doing things right, you should never be in the red, and we are never in the red. But it was a matter of just not making enough money to pay back school loans or pay back bills, or starting to rent houses and so on and so forth. So yeah, I would suggest finding the right job though, right? So I was at one time doing the family group home, which kind of just got really grueling because it was shift work. Sometimes I was working an entire night shift, basically from 7 to 7, and then going in and landscaping all day, and then getting like 3-4 hours of sleep and going back on an entire night shift. So it gets a little grueling. A better balance for me was when I was working as a bartender, when I left the group home and started just doing the bartending. Because that's just a night shift. It's 5-6 hours max, and you make some tips and you make good money, but then you also can still work on your business, because it's also not something that you do 5-7 days a week, right? Maybe working 3 shifts a week or 4 shifts a week, right? So I suggest finding that balance, finding the right job that you can still invest your energy into the business and starting the business.
So Jordan, what is that jumping off point where you're working a job and you're also trying to get this business off the ground? Or at least what was that jumping off point for you where you decided, you know what, this is the right time? And did you do it kind of in the off season leading up to the start of spring and getting into a new season? Or what was that timeline like in terms of choosing that right time?
We started having, so it was actually like I think it was about May, or no, it was the end of April. So it was the end of April, beginning of the season. And we had started booking up a few months worth of work, and they started becoming more complex jobs. So it wasn't just like a front walkway with a couple steps. We started getting pool jobs with like a front entrance, sides, a pool job. Like it was kind of 360 jobs, larger jobs, where our profit margins were higher. So I had that security and also had a little bit of funds built up that I knew that I could go into this. And then, I had a good relationship with the restaurant that I worked at. If something didn't work out, I could always, go back to that job. So that was the point where basically we just got enough jobs. We started booking a couple months in advance where I felt confident, and we weren't having to, do as extreme marketing as we were at the beginning. Because it was, when we first started, it was 1 full day of marketing working for 3 days, 1 full day of marketing working for 2 days, 1 full day of marketing working for 5 days. You know what I mean? So it was a lot of groundwork, just basically trying to grind and find those jobs, and we didn't know when the next job was going to be. But then when we finally knew, okay, we have somewhere to go for the next 2 months, we know that we're going to pick up a couple jobs in the meantime as for those 2 months. We kind of went from there, and that was the time I felt confident that everything was going to work out, and that we had kind of started building the right processes.
Getting close to that jumping off point, I like the timing of it, because you were seeing how those jobs were coming in and booking your schedule, and then making that decision, as opposed to like, midway through a season, and then you work a few months, the snow starts flying, and then where's that money coming from? But getting into that, where did those jobs come from? Those larger scale jobs like you were talking about, where were they coming from? Were they still coming from the same way you were getting leads for those smaller jobs in the past?
So the first actual real big one actually came from the neighbor of a client that we had flyer dropped and went door to door to. And we had gotten that job, and then the neighbor across the street saw the work that we did, saw our work ethic, and basically said, you know what, hey, I have a larger job for you. He was a architect who was very, very particular, and actually along the way probably really helped us out because he was very anal, very particular. So kind of taught us a lot about, being very anal. But weird enough, we were actually getting quite a few jobs. So we would do this event in a local area. We have like a rib fest. So there's a rib fest where everyone kind of sets up vendors and sets up booths, but it was weird because we were kind of the only local like contracting company per se that would set up a booth there. And I don't know how it came about that we decided to start doing RibFest, but we did RibFest for about 2 years, and it actually generated a lot of leads, it's really funny. I know a lot of people will say they'll do home shows, but for some reason we turned to this RibFest. Funny story, was really embarrassing. I mean, our first year, we stayed up all night trying generating pictures and putting together binders and so on and so forth. And we didn't really have one of those actual pop-up tents. So we legit had like when you go camping and you have a tent that you barbecue under or whatever. We had one of those, and we looked pretty fly by night on the Friday. We looked pretty bad, so we were really embarrassed. So that night we went home, spent all night again redoing everything that we needed to do. Went to Staples at 7 a.m. in the morning, right when they opened, got everything reprinted and redone, and got a couple banners done and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's actually how we generated quite a few of our bigger jobs, was through this Rib Fest. And weird enough, because we weren't only booking, 1-2 months in advance, these Rib Fests would happen in around June, right? So yeah, that's kind of weird enough, but that's how we started getting our larger jobs, was to this Rib Fest. And I feel like the reason why, it was just a little bit more of a informal, and there wasn't a lot of competition around. So we were able to really create that rapport with the client before we actually even saw their job.
That's really interesting. So moving forward, or recently, have you done a similar strategy with a Rib Fest or with a home show? And moving forward, would you do it again?
Moving forward, definitely not. No. So starting out a business, I think things like dropping flyers and going door-to-door sales is a very inexpensive way of marketing. You can spend $200 to $300 on a couple thousand flyers, depending on how high quality you want them to be, and you can actually generate a lot of leads that way. And then we transitioned to the Rib Fest, which obviously is like trying to think back, $500-$700 door fee, and then you'd end up spending maybe $300 on marketing material like flyers, branding material, and business cards and so on and so forth. But then essentially we finally kind of, I don't know why it was, but we kind of realized Rib Fest before home shows. So we started doing home shows. Home shows are great. However, the one thing I will have to say about them is there's a lot of competition. So you're competing against a lot of people, and unless you really build that rapport with the client, or we started gaining strategies at home shows to make them a little bit more successful for us, like booking appointments right on the spot with clients. I think that was a huge key, because a lot of people will just take your card and say they'll call you, and they never do. So booking appointments with clients right at the booth during a home show, have your calendar out. I would book anywhere from 30 to 60 appointments in a home show. Probably only end up landing 5 to 6 of them. But so a good way to get started if you don't have other leads coming in. But it does take a lot of time and a lot of your energy. Going forward, we started working with a designer, Nancy Green. She was actually introduced to us by Mike, Paver King. When Mike took on the job at Permacon, he he, gave our contact to Nancy because we had reached out to Mike that year, right before he had left Lake Ridge Contracting. Right before he left them, we reached out to him and asked him if he would be a reference for us for Landscape Ontario. So that's Mike kind of looked at our work and gave his reference to us. And then when he left Lake Ridge for Permacon, he wanted to make sure Nancy was taken care of, and that's just the kind of person that Mike is. He makes sure, whatever his decisions aren't going to negatively affect other people. So he reached out to Nancy and said, hey, I think you should work with these young guys. They're kind of up and coming. And we worked with Nancy a lot. Nancy got us a lot of really qualified leads, qualified jobs, just because her and Mike had built up such a good reputation. We use stuff like Facebook ads, we use Kijiji ads, but coming to full circle to where we are now, I would say it's more word of mouth and website. Again, it all depends on where. So all of our marketing streams throughout the duration of our business have worked really well. However, I really think it all depends on where you are in your business. So obviously you can't just your first year show up at a home show and have no pictures of any jobs you've never done, right? So you really have to, make those steps going forward to try and find the right marketing stream that works for you. Now, like I said, it's all word of mouth, it's website. And then if you do have a little bit of money, I think Google ads also work very well at creating new leads and more qualified leads than a home show does. Because a home show, person's going there and they're meeting 4 different people, right? It depends on what type of client they are. But if they're a client that's strictly looking for price, they're going to find someone that's cheaper than you. So I really think that it depends on where you are in your business, what marketing stream works best for you.
Taking away the word of mouth leads and maybe the website leads, as you were growing your business, where were those quality leads coming from? The projects that you guys were really wanting to take on? Because you mentioned door-to-door, online ads like platforms like Kijiji, Facebook, Google ads, home shows, and Ribfest. Where were those quality leads coming from that you guys wanted?
So ultimately, I mean, for where we were in the beginning of the business, flyer dropping and door-to-door sales worked really well, and so did the Ribfest for the most part. However, transitioning, we did actually get quite a few jobs from Ribfest and then home shows. Home shows were probably where we started getting a lot of good jobs. However, the only thing I'll say about home shows, you really have to have a strategy going into it. You have to be better than your competition. You have to, almost know your competition's weaknesses and what you offer over your competition. And you really have to take the time to just build the rapport with the person while you're at the home show. So a lot of our leads that we ended up selling from the home show were leads that we built a really good rapport with the client. If you are going to go to a home show, don't just go there and hand out flyers and say, call me. You really got to talk to the client, start talking to the client about their project, talking about details, show them projects that you've done that are like theirs. So home shows can be profitable. However, you really just got to watch because they're a lot of work. So you got to set up your booth. You got to take your booth down all within 3 days. You have to show up every single day for about 12 hours. And then you end up with 60 leads. So my mistake when we first started doing it was I would try and see every single one of those leads, and I would kill myself with consultations, and I would have way too much on my plate. And then I kind of had a bad strategy there where it was like, first in, first out as far as quotes go. And you can't do that. You really got to prioritize your leads. So, you may have seen 4 people before this job that is a pool with a cabana and a deck and lighting and gardening and so on and so forth. You have to prioritize that lead over other leads, depending on, how your consultation went with them. So all in all, someone starting a business, I would say, first try to get yourself some content of the work that you've done. And then I would test the water at home shows. But once you get yourself to a point of your business where you are working off word of mouth and website leads, home shows wouldn't be worth your time after you have built up that clientele.
So getting into how you guys transitioned from those door to door to where you guys are now, you mentioned those door to door, you would really take on in the very beginning, would take on kind of whatever work that was needing to be done, of course, with landscaping, lawns, whatever it might be. How did you transition those services to where you guys are now? Did you guys always want to be doing what you guys are doing right now? Or
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that was always the goal. The goal was always to do hardscaping, because that's the only thing we did at Red Rose. Red Rose didn't do residential lawn cutting or anything like that. They didn't do commercial snow plowing. All they did was hardscaping. So that was kind of our model business, because that's what we knew the most. I mean, we only really knew of their brick, to be honest. So that was kind of the only thing that we knew. So yeah, I was always looking to be a hardscaping company. However, we knew that we had to start gaining trust from people to get them to allow us to do bigger jobs like hardscaping. So whether it was, putting soil in someone's garden bed for $300, or whether it was cleaning someone's eaves trough for $500, those jobs sometimes led to us doing a $5,000-$6,000 patio, which back in the day when we first started, a $5,000-$6,000 patio was like hitting the jackpot, because we were just starting out, right? Sounds funny to say, but that was like hitting the jackpot. So it was just gaining those relationships with people and allowing them to trust you that you're going to, show up on time, do the work, do a good job, keep their property clean, and so on and so forth.
So continuing with, once you've got a customer as a lead, where do you take that from there? Whether they email you, call you, whatever it might be, how do you communicate with them and schedule that initial appointment or pre-qualify them? What do you do?
When we first started the business, I mean, we would get a call. We'd be so overwhelmed with joy. We would just jump up and leave the house and say, hey, can you do it in 2 hours? And be at the person's house and try and give them a quote right on the spot. However, that's obviously changed quite a bit. So now I do not charge for consultations right now, but I do qualify the lead first. So leads, we just had our website kind of redone, and we're still working out a couple more pages on it. But we do have a form submission on our website that asks obviously about the scope of the project, but more importantly about the budget. So there's a minimum amount, and that is how we qualify leads to come in through the website. When I get a call on the phone, I always start by asking, about the scope of the project and then the timeline. So the scope of the project tells me it's worth my time or not. So nowadays, if I get a call and someone says, hey, I need a side door step system and a walkway. Okay, well, the smallest job we do is $10,000. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, we're not looking at investing that much. So right off the bat, I've saved myself time from going out to see that client. So I would say, develop yourself a minimum amount of money that works for your business and how your business is structured and what is profitable for you. Some guys can do $5,000 jobs and end up being really profitable. It just doesn't work for my business, my overhead, and our machinery. And then basically I also ask, like I said, about timeline. So usually I'm booking at this point about 4 to 6 months in advance. The client's like, hey, I want my job done yesterday. I tell them when we're booking and they're like, nope, sorry, that doesn't work for me. So there goes, another waste of my time. So I don't have to waste my time on those jobs where ultimately the client isn't going to be a fit for us. And then if it is a job that I do want to do, the client, is okay with our scheduling, okay with our timeline, and it comes in through the phone. I ask the client, can you go to our website, please? Can you just follow up on all the scope that you asked for, click off all the boxes that apply to you, and also do you mind entering your budget? The reason I send them to our website to enter the budget is because on the phone, you're putting them on the spot, and likely you're only speaking to one person in the family. So obviously the husband and the wife make the decision together, right? So by going to the website, this actually gives them time to talk amongst each other about, hey, like, are we willing to invest 30,000? Are we willing to invest 50,000? What is it? What are we comfortable with? So that kind of gauges me on what I can actually sell the client on when I go to the meeting. So the client goes, hey, I want a patio that's X amount of square feet, or this by this is this big, and I want these features. I know right off the bat, hey, we might not be able to afford this feature, and I can use that as kind of a gauge and a selling tip also. So if a client says they want all these things, but then I say, okay, just to refresh, you said your budget was 35,000. This isn't going to work within your budget. We're more looking around 50,000. Sometimes clients will go, you know what? Okay, we just didn't know what the budget was, like what the cost of stuff like this is, and they'll tell me to go ahead. We're okay if it ends up coming in around 50. So having that price point from the client, I think, is really important. And then going into the actual presentation of the quote, my initial quote is the full package. So I pride myself in kind of taking the time to make sure that I outline all the client's needs and give them a full and final quote for everything that I'm offering and that they have asked for. It's not any budget. It's not a rough estimate. It's the whole shoot and shebangle. So I asked them to give me a week or two to prepare the quote and design. I take the time now to do the designs themselves myself. And I also work out material costs on a material and labor basis. I don't do square footages. I don't do per yard, anything along those lines. I think it's really important to do material costs and labor costs and submit your quote that way. And I also think it's really important to submit a thorough quote at the beginning, so that the client, when they are comparing quotes from another contractor, they can see everything that you are offering opposed to what another company is offering. And it also eliminates conflicts down the road because the client fully understands what you're offering and what you aren't offering. So what's included in the quote and what's not included in the quote. I think that's really important. And most of the clients that I sign with appreciate that about our process. And that's one of the reasons why they do sign with us, is because we do take the time to really outline all their needs and prepare them with an accurate, thorough quote. And then I also now, from the last 3 years or so, we've been submitting all of our quotes in person. So we sit down at the kitchen table, meet with the client, talk about all the items. I do this because it avoids miscommunications through email or miscommunications through the phone. If the client has any questions, they can ask then and there, and I can answer those questions, opposed to, a client sending me an email and it takes me half a day to get back to them. And then they take half a day to get back to me. And then I take half a day to get back to them. It's just that back and forth that it saves on. Obviously, COVID has kind of put an obstacle in the middle of that. But recently I have been going back to meeting people in person.
So you put a lot of effort into that after the initial meetup, the quote and everything. And I like that you brought up that you really take the time to pre-qualify the customers, because if you're going to go through all that effort, it can be a lot of wasted time if you're not pre-qualifying your customers properly. So getting into the breakdown of the quote, what do you include in that? Like when you talk about like having everything in the quote, are you doing a breakdown in pricing? Are you doing or is it just one price? Do you include like installation, things that you guys do in the installation to make sure it's going to last, all of this stuff?
Yeah, so typically my quote, it's done. I use QuickBooks like most people do. So first off, every single item on our job is priced separately. Everything. So there'll be, porch, there'll be front entrance, there'll be driveway apron, there'll be sidewalkway 1, sidewalkway 2, backyard patio, fire pit patio, gazebo, lighting, barbecue, fire pit, so on and so forth. So everything's priced separately. The way I like to do that and the way I like to present it is, here's your pizza, choose what toppings you want on it. So that way the client, so when the client asks me for just basically a basic patio, I just want, a 16 by 30 patio that I can put my dining room table on, and then I can have a lounge area. So I take that information, because now I know what they're looking to utilize their space for, and I make other suggestions. So I look at things that are missing in their yard, like privacy or planting, and I upsell them on those aspects. And then lighting, obviously. For the cost of lighting, it's night and day, but I give them all those extras, but I give it to them separately, so that the client doesn't look at me and go, hey, you're just trying to be a salesman and sell me up on everything like that I didn't ask for. I'm just showing them what the full capabilities of their backyard are. And then if they go and start picking away at the design, I don't have to revise a quote that says $60,000. It's simple for the client to go, okay, I'm going to eliminate that item that's 5,000. I'm going to eliminate this item that's 3,000. I'm going to eliminate this item that's 4,000. And then on large jobs, so let's say, I include, it's a big job, front entrance, side walkways, 2 separate patios in the backyard, a little raised area, steps, lighting, a wooden structure, so on and so forth. I'll give the client all the individual costs, but then I'll also give them a bulk job cost. So because like most people, you save on your material with the more that you order. And then B, the longer you're on a job and the less floating you have to do on and off jobs, obviously it's more profitable for you. So I give them a bulk job cost. So let's say their entire job, that huge job was going to cost, $80,000. If my large order material discount or my floating charge can save them $5,000-$6,000, I give them a separate quote of that and say, you know what, if you do 90% of this job and maybe take out one aspect of the job, I can honor a bulk pricing on this.
When it comes to breaking down price, do you ever have a customer that says, so say your quote includes patio, lighting, fire pit, and a wooden feature, and they say, well, you know what, I know somebody that can do the wooden feature for me, so take that out, but we'll take everything else. Do you ever have come across that scenario?
Oh, of course, yeah. Definitely. I've had clients do stuff like that, and it's not a problem with me, as long as there's a clear expectation of who's doing what's expected. So obviously, like you said, for a wooden structure, likely I will have to do the footings for the wooden structure, because that wooden structure is going to be over top of my patio, or he's going to have to come in. So depending on what type of arrangement it is, could impact the cost. Because if I have a large patio and someone wants to put a wooden structure up in the middle of it and I have to excavate around it, obviously it's going to take me more time to do the excavation. So yeah, that does, the stuff like that does happen. It's just kind of being clear with the customer on what implications it may have going down the road, as far as their costs go or logistics go.
I like your transparency with the customer and everything that you get into with that. Going on to the designs, are you insisting on a design for every job, or do you guys still do jobs that don't necessarily need a design? They just maybe need to see a sample of the product. How do you approach that?
So yeah, I do a design for every single one of my jobs. So again, we've kind of transitioned ourselves that we're not doing those small jobs. The only time I do a small job is for a past client. So if a past client calls me and says, hey, I'm getting a hot tub, can you pour me a hot tub pad? Say, sure, you're a past client. I'm going to make sure I take care of you. But for the most part, we are trying to do more large scale jobs. Even a basic front entrance that's only, $15,000-$20,000. We still do a design for. The reason being is one, it helps the guys on site, because I can give them that drawing that they can scale. And two, it just eliminates confusion with the client. So during the job, we have a blueprint that basically says this is what we're doing. And if a client ever asks for a change, it's clearly shown in the drawing that that's not included in the job, and that obviously there would be an additional cost to do something like that. Or the client goes, I didn't know it was going to look like that. We don't run into those issues, because the client always has that visual of the job. And then also, I mean, I think it's important to, if you're trying to sell at a premium dollar, which we run our business more over quality over quantity, and use that as one of our mottos. I think you have to sell a job at top dollar and top hourly rate, you do need to provide a drawing. You can't just go there with a napkin sketch, or you're going to be competing with the guys that work on the weekend and work for, $30 an hour. So I think that's important. A design is very important.
So do you charge for your designs, or do you do the charge for it but discount it off the project once that comes to pass?
No, so I include a small fee, administrative fee in my designs. So that being said, obviously I don't get every job that I quote. But for me and where we are at right now, I feel like it's a happy medium for us, where, the money that I do charge to the clients that we end up actually selling to, makes up for my time that I do for clients that we don't actually sell.
And how do you decide on a minimum for a project? Because you've spoken about that a little bit. How do you evaluate that in your business and say, okay, this is our now minimum that we're going to offer, whether that's a dollar amount or whether that's a project type? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so over the last year or so when I kind of took over the office, I changed a couple things in the business. So before in the business, we used to price per square foot, per yard, per rock, per step. There was like set charges. So was great because quotes would only take you 10, 15 minutes. But I started, going back when I started taking over the office of the business, like the office side of the business, and kind of thinking back, like how many hours did I spend on this? Are we really making money by charging square foot on these aspects? Or are we charging too much money on square foot? If there's a 5,000 square foot patio, like theoretically it shouldn't be the exact same square footage cost, because the longer you're there, the less flow time, the less labor you have. And then once you get started laying, like every hardscaper knows, once you start laying, it goes down like, you're blinking your eye and you got a pallet laid, right? It's just the way it goes. So we started using QuickBooks, and we used a new accounting company. So then I started actually putting all of our jobs in as projects themselves. So in our bookkeeping and in our QuickBooks, every project has its own file. So all the expenses derived from that project are associated to that file. And then all the labor is associated to that file. So I can actually go back and I can look at certain projects and say, you know what, like this type of work isn't making us money. We do better when we do this type of work, or we do better when jobs are this amount. So like most businesses, everyone probably has a dollar amount where they do better on than others. Just the way their overhead is structured, their machines are structured, and their guys work. So for us, I mean, an absolute minimum is $10,000. But that's a very, our typical job is ranging between 30 to 50.
Gotcha. So once that customer wants to go ahead with you guys, what does that look like in terms of a payment structure for that project? Does it vary from project to project? Do you guys have a set payment structure?
Yeah, we have a set payment structure. So it's 5% security deposit. A few days before I start the job, I ask for 55%. And then once the job is completed, I ask for 40%.
Got it. And getting into not necessarily payments, but anything that's happened to you guys, whether it's on the job site, off the job site, in the office, what do you guys have a horror story that you'd want to share on the podcast to kind of help our listeners understand the difficulties that come with owning a business, and to maybe put some systems in place to help avoid that certain horror story?
Yeah, so a couple things. So I've never not been paid for a job, and my true belief is that if you do a good job, your contract is, outlining everything that you're going to do. There's no reason that no one will not pay you. As long as you do a good job and you've outlined everything clearly that you're actually including in your quote, and won your quote and your contract, there's no reason you should not get paid. So I've never been taken to court. I've never had a lawsuit. I've never had someone not pay me. So, knock on wood, that never happens in the future. But I feel like, the reason some people may have that issue, maybe they worked for the wrong client, or maybe they didn't provide what they were actually advertising they were going to provide. So as far as horror stories in business, a lot of them come from snow removal. Snow removal is great. But when first snowfall happens, you start all your equipment around 6 o'clock, that you're going out at 2 a.m. You start all your equipment, everything's working fine. And then you go out at 2 a.m. and nothing is working. Your salter's not working, your plow's not working, nothing. And it's the first snowfall of the year and you have a couple new contracts. That was a nightmare we went through. We finally kind of figured everything out by, basically working all night on stuff. And we're not mechanics by any means, but working on stuff all night. Should have been out there plowing, had to eventually go wait in a parking lot for a shop to open, and then got our stuff fixed. So that was kind of a nightmare. So I would say, really take plowing machinery maintenance very seriously, because I don't know if we were at that point, and that might be the reason why we ran into that. And then two, I had something happen recently this year where I had a guy that had been working with us for almost 2 years. He was really good. He was kind of like a lead hand / foreman. So if we had smaller jobs or we had to finish a job, we can leave him on his own, or he can go start a job on his own, and was very experienced in the industry and so on and so forth. Started experiencing some slight issues with him. You order a concrete truck for a slab for a immerse spa. So one of those swim spas. So it was like 5 meters of concrete. Truck was supposed to show up at 2:30, shows up at 4:30, and one of your main guys basically just walks off the site and doesn't say a word to anyone. And it's 4:30 and you have 5 meters of concrete to run, and your Bobcat broke down that day, so you have to do it all by hand. So that actually happened this year. Obviously we fired that employee because that doesn't set a good example for everyone else, but he was one of our more skilled employees, so we had to go through that. So yeah, I would say that's probably our horror story for this year.
Absolutely. And two good stories for sure. When it comes to snow plowing, do you guys do that to kind of keep your guys busy during the winter? Is that something that also you've wanted to do coming into this industry?
Coming into this industry, I wouldn't say it was something that we looked at, because again, the company that I worked for didn't do snow removal. I think they just made enough money in the summer, they didn't have to. But we were offered a subcontract in 2017 when we finally got a real 2500 pickup truck. We were offered a subcontract, so we started subcontracting and doing snow plowing, and the reason for doing that was just to pay overhead, and then also keep me and my past partner paid on salary throughout the winter time. Now, it's about keeping the guys busy, but two, again, just making sure you're not eating into that money that you've made all summer long. And now your overhead is going to start eating away at all the money that you've earned. So yeah, I think, we started to get a little bit better handle on snow removal, and I think we have better processes in place, and this year we're actually expanding our snow removal operation, and probably going to be our first year that we actually make a significant profit, opposed to making a small profit and just making ends meet.
Nice. And getting into that, getting that pickup truck, that 2500, what came next in your business? What was that next piece of equipment that you purchased?
So the next piece of equipment that we purchased was the MT85. So essentially it was, getting a 2500. It was getting an MT85. And then me and my past business partner, we rented a dump trailer for an entire season. just because, again, we'd had no loans. We didn't get any loans. So I basically paid for a dump trailer for an entire summer. So within that 8 months, basically paid the balance on what a brand new one would cost. So needless to say, going into next year, we bought a dump trailer first thing.
The loans. Why no business loans?
Yeah. So, I mean, starting out, obviously we didn't know where things were going to go. We were trying to be cautiously optimistic. So we just didn't want to bite off more than we could chew. Two, also coming out of school. So I had a ton of debt because I paid for school myself. So I had a ton of debt from school and not the best credit rating. So we couldn't really get any loans for one. We knew we couldn't. We didn't try. We just knew we couldn't. And then two, once we actually started to build up a little bit of equity and we actually started to build up, our credit and stuff like that and pay off our debt, got to the point where we felt like, we're growing at the right pace. So I don't think it's smart to go bite off more than you could chew. Like, obviously there's a million things you want when you start a business. Like, you obviously want the right truck. You want an enclosed tool trailer. You want a dump trailer. You even want like a dump truck. You want an excavator. You want a small machine. You want a full-size machine. You want all those things, but it's not like you're running a tiling business or a flooring business. All that stuff costs, $300,000 to $500,000 worth of investments, right? So I think it's important to take it in strides and only bite off as much as you could chew, because you never know, one, if you're pricing things right, if you're going to have that profit over the winter, so on and so forth. So I think it is important to, do what you can with what you have.
So with your equipment, anything that stands out, whether it's equipment, tools that you guys live by on the job site, or anything in the near future that you guys are going to be investing in?
So I think at this point for a residential landscape company, we have almost everything that we need. So this past year, we also just invested a lot. And the year before that, we invested a lot in quite a few machines. So what I live and die by, and I think that's important for any residential landscape business, is some type of compact skid steer, whether that be an MT85, whether that be an S70, whether that be a Ditch Witch or Vermeer, anything like that, something along those lines, and a compact excavator. So for 2 years, we ran the company without an excavator. This year, we purchased our excavator. We rented on a few jobs, but this year we purchased one, and it makes a world of a difference. Essentially, your small skid steer becomes a material mover instead of a digging machine, which it ultimately is meant to be a material deliverer. It's not meant to be digging, large scale patios. So I think an excavator, a MT85, and a dump trailer are essentials. Luxuries would be having stuff like tool trailer, like having a flatbed trailer that you can float multiple machines at once. And then, probably our last purchase we kind of really need to make for now until we start branching off into several crews would be a full-size skid steer. Full-size skid steer in order to move full pallets, load dump trucks, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha. And then getting into the installation side of things, anything that you guys live by on the job site?
Yeah. I mean, we came from a background where, the company that we work for really strive for quality. So that's what we said when we came into this business, was for instance, our motto is quality matters. So anyone that knows that it's all over our trucks. Quality matters, quality matters, quality matters. So I try to use all the products that are available to us for unique project needs to make sure that they stand the test of time. I believe that if you build the right way, your jobs will last a lifetime. And if you build with your client's best interests at heart, you will always have work. Word of mouth is the most powerful way of marketing. So if your client can see that you are doing more than other people, and then you give them that good experience, you're always gonna have somewhere to go. You're always gonna work. You're gonna work every day. Me personally, I don't understand how so many contractors are so irresponsible these days when building. There are a lot of contractors I see that are just completely irresponsible and don't use all the products that actually are available to us for the small amount of money that they do cost. It's worth using. I mean, I don't submit a quote to get the job. I submit the quote to make money. So I'm not submitting a quote and not using all these products out there just so that I'm, $1,000 or $2,000 cheaper than the next guy. I'm submitting a quote to make sure that their job lasts a lifetime, and two, that I make money. So, for our installation practices are a 12-inch excavation for a pedestrian application, and then a 18-inch excavation for a vehicular application. Pedestrian applications, we use woven geotextile, and we use clear stone for all the benefits that everyone knows that they have. And then vehicular applications, obviously woven geotextile, clear stone, and triaxial drive grid. So little things like that. Obviously, when you're building walls, you need to do geogrid, fabrics, all that good stuff. One thing that we have adopted this year would be concrete edging. So some of the number one complaints that I got in the past was, that little, 1/4 inch or that little 1/2 inch of poly that's not filled on the edge of your border, or the edge restraint lifting and moving, because it's just spikes driven into the ground. So for any type of application, we're now using concrete edging unless it's a gator based application. And whenever we do, so nowadays I've been doing actually a lot of garden edges. So instead of building raised garden beds, I've been doing a lot of garden edges, but we mortar our garden edges in place. Concrete edging our edges in place instead of using those clips and so on and so forth that they come with. In the past 2 years, we've been using a lot of gator base on our patios. So any patio that's in a backyard that is not a raised patio, I use gator base. I feel like there is a significant savings on labor, that you can actually pass forward a bit of that to your customer, so that your customer can add those features to a job. So they can add stuff like lighting, they can add stuff like a fire pit or a built-in barbecue or a wooden structure. So that's why I use gator base a lot. It also is a lot less hours on your machines. So we all invest a lot of money into our machines. If you can save a couple hours on your machines, might as well. I've been using gator base. I think our first project was 2018, and I've never received a call back.
As we come to a close here, Jordan, I've got 2 more questions for you. One being, do you have any mentors or people online, offline that you look to for that mentorship, or just inspiration in general, or anybody that you want to give a shout out here on this podcast?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people know it, whoever is on Instagram. One of my mentor friends is Mike from Paver King. So early on, as I mentioned, he, referenced us to Landscape Ontario. He hooked us up with Nancy, and then now, we work together a couple times a year, whether that be me installing a hardscape project for him, or him hauling dirt for me, or hauling gravel for me. We use each other to work a lot, and we always bounce ideas off each other, thought processes, so on and so forth. I try to talk to him, at least once every week or 2 weeks. So yeah, that's one of my kind of mentors / friends in the business, would be Mike. As far as inspiration goes, I think guys like Premier Outdoor Living, that's definitely a way we would like to start taking our business, was be the way he has taken his, with mixing wood and stone, because we do like to work a lot with wood. So his designs are phenomenal. Someone like Group Zamco, he does phenomenal designs, but again, you really have to have the right clientele to do designs that he does. Green Ace serves as a form of inspiration. Cedar Springs, Heritage Stone, MMSI. scenic view, scenic stone, T Underhill Designs. We also, like I said, do a lot of decking. So, people like Dr. Decks and Aztec Decks, who's a local company. So those are kind of places we go for inspiration. Yeah.
And Jordan, knowing what you know now, what is that one thing that you wish you knew from the very beginning, starting your business?
Yeah, so one thing I wish we knew was about all the different building practices and techniques like clear stone fabrics and geogrids. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, we worked with we worked with a company that did, everything very old school. So we were very close-minded and we did everything the way they did it. We worked with Brooklyn Concrete products for about a year and a half until we were finally exposed to all the actual other brick manufacturers that are out there. For those who don't know, Brooklyn Concrete is a very traditional looking paver, like a tumbled paver per se, something comparable to like a Brussels block. So we did that for a long time, and we were building on granular A with natural screenings, not limestone, but natural screenings. We weren't even using edging. We would do this thing Red Rose called a toe. So you basically pull your screenings up on the side of the patio and tamp them. So a lot of old school things. So I wish I knew more about all the education that was available. However, I do think that that has really progressed in the last couple of years, and people are becoming more aware of those things. And they're more prevalent nowadays, like all the conferences that are available. So I really wish I knew about the conferences. I really wish I knew about Landscape Ontario, different, boards, stuff like that can actually teach you and offer you a lot to what is actually available in the industry, because again, might be unique to me, but I started with a company that was very closed-minded and very straightforward thinking, very old school. So I wish I knew about all these new revolutions in the business. The main thing I wish I knew was pricing, time, and material opposed to square footage per yard, per slab, per everything like that. I think it's really important to know your costs, know your overhead costs, know how much that's costing you per year, know how much per dollar that's costing you per hour, according to how many people you have, and then knowing how much money you need to make. Calculate your billable hours throughout the year and calculate what your profit margins can be depending on what you charge. I think that's really important to running a successful business, is pricing, time, and material. So for the reasons I just mentioned, but also, every job is different and square footage doesn't account for variables. So for instance, back in the day, we were charging square footage and you're charging square footage on a porch. And then a porch is a small area that involves a lot of cuts and sometimes a lot of notch cuts and intricate cuts and working with different heights and so on and so forth. We were basically doing porches for free in the past. But now, you start accounting for all those little things, and now it starts becoming profitable. So you made less money in the past on square footage stuff because it might have been a really detail orientated job, or it might have been a job that required extra fill, or so on and so forth, right? Or the access on the street, so you could only have certain machines hauling away material or certain bins hauling away material. It's little things like that I think make a large difference, even though they may be a few $100s here or there on every job. If you do 20, 30 jobs a year, that adds up into a couple $1,000s. That's straight profit. And then I think on larger jobs, we actually, like larger quotes in the past, when we quoted by square footage or face footage and yards and per piece and so on and so forth. I think we lost on a lot of larger jobs in the past because personally, my belief is, if you're laying a 5,000 square foot patio, let's say it's flat, many 5,000 square foot patios are not actually flat, but just say it's a flat 5,000 square foot patio and you price per square foot at $25 to $30 a square foot, you're likely going to lose that job because your price is going to be astronomical for what you actually have to do. Once you're on a job and you're on a job of that quantity, one, you're getting a pretty good large order material discount, and then two, like once, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, once you start laying and you have that initial grade done and so on and so forth, the pavers just go down. So I think that was one thing I would say to people starting this business would be figure out your rates, figure out what you need to cover your overhead, figure out what you need to make money, and take the time to quote every job as its own job instead of approaching it as a cookie cutter.
Excellent advice, Jordan. Jordan, where can our audience find out more about what you've got going on over there?
I mean, next year I really hope to be a little bit more prevalent on social media. This year was the first year that I started doing designs. So honestly, I was like designs myself. I was absolutely swamped this year. I was just so busy, and it just so happens to be that social media was the thing that suffered. I also am trying to gear my social media a little bit more towards a professional approach. So in years coming, probably having someone take care of that for me, getting more professional photos done, and so on and so forth. So as far as that goes, I mean, if anyone ever wanted to shoot the shit and talk, I mean, reach out to me on Instagram. I am on it all the time. I just got to be better at doing more stories and keeping up to date.
You were involved with that Mike's Paver King, that Squadra driveway, right? Last year?
Yeah, I was. I was fortunate enough, Mike got the job. He kind of pitched the idea to me, told me kind of what he was looking to do. We weren't really sure, how to make the fans actually interlock with one another. So between my partner, myself, and Mike, we kind of spent some time making a template to try and, get it to work. Our template ultimately actually didn't end up working when we got on site. So we had to completely redo the template. But all in all, I think the job turned out great. We did, finally figure it out. Obviously, the job's complete.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a pretty crazy job. Looking back on it, I would say probably didn't charge enough labor for it because it's very, very labor intensive. But I mean, it's one of those things, you do once in a lifetime. It's one of those things you can always share stories about, tell about. So yeah, pretty happy to be a part of that project, and fortunate that Mike, offered the job to us.
So like, how long did those cuts take?
The funny part is the cutting. I mean, it did take a long time. It was more laying the pavers that took the most amount of time, to be completely honest. So we kind of laid the skeletons with all the full pieces, and then we worked onto the cuts. So I think one Saturday we went in. There was 2 guys marking, 2 guys cutting, and we cut for about 9 to 10 hours straight. And then after that, we had a following Monday that basically the entire day. So we probably had 2 days of full cutting.
Man, yeah, that's insane. Just seeing that driveway, just it gives me a headache just thinking about having to go through that and laying that.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, like the worst part about it was, I mean, it was, the middle to the end of October last year, and we were experiencing snow here, and in Whippy. So there was snow on and off throughout the job. The snow would kind of get in between our cracks and our joints. The day that we actually did poly, it was supposed to be no rain, no snow, nothing like that. And of course, every, 10, 15 minutes, it would start just, scattered flurries or a little bit of rain or whatever it is. So I think there was about 6 of us there. We actually had our rep, Jeff Cunningham, there. And, we had 3 guys on torches, a couple guys on brooms, and a poly job that probably should have took an afternoon, took the entire day just because of all the torching we had to do.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
But an amazing project. It's amazing how it turned out and how it looks. One definitely to show off to future customers, eh?
Yeah, definitely. It's it's that, and then it's just kind of the memories, you know what I mean? Like it's just something you don't really get to do every day. So it's nice to be able to kind of say that you did it. It's very unique. And again, lots of memories with the guys and Mike and so on and so forth.